set, but Alberta ain't ready to kneel just yet. They chose their king, their power was met, but we don't answer to Ottawa yet. No crown gave us what we've earned, just dirt and fire and lessons learned. Now the ground it shakes, the steel it groans, and Alberta walks alone. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line they lost. Alberta stands, never on its knees. A nation born in the forge of the free. From the rigs to the rails, the crops to the code, we lit their streets, we bore their load. They laughed at pride, they mocked the West, but freedom don't die, it just waits for the test. The cowboys ride, the farmers rise, 5 million strong under open skies. No leash, no lie, no foreign throne. This land is steel and it stands alone. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line they lost. Alberta stands, never on its knees. A nation born in the forge of the free.
Whoa, ho, 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 ho. It's 7-Eleven Daily Summary with Bruce Scholl. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for being here with me. What a pleasure. What an extraordinary time to be alive. Thank you so much for joining me. Make sure to share this out, get some more eyeballs on this information. I have got a returning guest. I'm excited to have him back, and we're going to break some ground on some of the most basic information that you're going to need to make your family more survivable, more strength, more healthy, so that you can continue to make this world a better place, whether it's Alberta, whether it's Canada, wherever you're coming to us from. We're going to have some great information. Shawn Buckley is joining me. The amazing lawyer that has been working for your health, my health, everyone's health. The lawyer that has worked on the NCI. If you saw any of that, you'll be honored to have the chance to listen to Shawn. And the NHPPA is his focus today, working on natural health products. Anyway, that's Shawn Buckley. We're going to have him join us here in a minute. I am, like I said, very excited to be here, very excited to be alive and to be with you. Make sure to share this out. Like I said, we have got a great show coming up. Anyway, I always like to start off by saying support your local business, support your local farmer, your rancher, your egg producer, your local artist. I love supporting local businesses. And the one that I like to support that I'm going to talk to you about here is nuggetstacker.com. You know what? I'm not your investment advisor, but I do suggest getting gold and silver. It has been a great thing that I have done for my family. It really does protect your family's wealth. I think some hard times are coming. Anyway, get some gold and silver in your family if you'd like to. You can go right through my website at unscrewthenews.com, or up at the top right-hand side, you can see that QR code and get you a bit of a discount on Nugget Stacker gold and silver. Give them a call, 1-866-644-2121 if you have any questions. Let's get into unscrewing some news, shall we? All right, I'm coming to you from the heart of the battle-ready nation of Alberta, and I bring you truth and optimism. Our goal is to break free from the media and the globalist mind control. It is May 13th, 2026. This is episode number 281. I've got Shawn Buckley for a Roundup. I want to welcome him. He is the lawyer extraordinaire, like I said, from the NCI. And thank you so much for joining me, Shawn. It's a pleasure to have you. As usual, I know that you've been super, super busy. And some of the things that I'll just give the audience a little bit of a taste of what we're hoping to talk about. One of them that we were going to get into was clone meats. And I know that that's front of mind on a lot of people's plate, or not on their plate.
Yeah, no pun intended,
the government. No pun intended. The government trying to push that through about a month ago. And some of the other things that I know that you've been working on is talking to farmers and ranchers about what's happening in their field, per se.
Again, no pun intended,
so
right?
we should talk about that. No, definitely the pun intended on that one. But I before we get started on those health impacts, I do need to talk about this, and I'm going to bring this up here. Hang on one second. Let me just bring this up because this just happened today, and we have to just briefly talk about this. But today, this is from Eva Chipiuk. Today, the ruling from Justice Leonard essentially found that the citizen-led independence petition process cannot proceed because the government did not fulfill certain constitutional responsibilities owed to the First Nations. So I want to just put this out there at the beginning of the show. We're not going to talk about this so much, but I want people to not get too excited. And I think that, she has some great words here. So let's just read this, and then we're going to go on with the rest of the show. But here is the important point. She says, the Alberta government did not initiate this petition process. Citizens did, though a lawful statutory mechanism created by the legislature itself. So does a court conclude that the government failed to fulfill duties that had not yet been, not even arisen or been carried out, particularly when the government itself had not initiated the referendum process? Okay, I think that's a good place to start. Let's just keep it in the back of our minds that this is not the end of the road. This is just a barrier in the way of the process. And I know that you guys are full-heartedly, moving forward in this process if that's where you want to be. But anyway, let's settle that just for a minute here. I don't know if you want to speak to any of this, Shawn. It may be.
Oh, actually, let's start by going a completely different direction, Bruce. So I didn't read that decision. Is there any more? Because all you've told us with what Eva has said is that that this basically referendum cannot go ahead because the province didn't properly consult with Aboriginal groups. Is that all we have?
That's essentially what this Justice Leonard had said. Let me just see if there's anything in what she said here. I did have, I can actually go to this because I bookmarked one from, let's see here, from Jeffrey Rath. This is just the statement from Stay Free Alberta. It says, concerning the recent judicial decision on the Stay Free Alberta independence petition, we disagree fundamentally with the decision, which appears on its face to violate the principles of natural justice and contain numerous errors of law. We have been instructed to prepare and file the appropriate appellate documents. I don't know if that gives you any more, but
yeah, well, so let's have a discussion, but premised on the understanding that all we're apparently being told, true or not true, is that the referendum cannot go ahead because a court has said the province did not properly consult with Aboriginal groups.
That's exactly the stance that I get, and it feels very disheartening on the outset. But you being a lawyer and really constitutionally minded, I think that you probably have a pretty good sense of what we can be looking forward to, I guess. What are your thoughts? I mean, just on the face. I mean, you obviously haven't read the whole decision, and but do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, and let's talk about we'll talk about wider things, and we'll talk about this because relying on Leighton Gray, who spoke at an NHPPA event this weekend, Aboriginal people make up 3% of the population. So let's just keep that in mind, 3%. And let's also keep in mind that, basically, with this ideology we have that, people that are not Aboriginal, so let's say Caucasians like myself or like you, let's say, a Caucasian child is born today in May 2026 in Canada. That Caucasian child, because of its race, is guilty. Not of anything that child did. The child was just born, but of things that happened, over 100 years ago, by people that are long dead. But somehow there's this ongoing guilt, and that in itself, I'm sorry, that's racism. You add any other race in there, and we've got a problem. Well, and it's not a surprise that it's racism. And I get that the idea, I'm not attacking affirmative action, although that's reverse racism. Let's at least call it what it is. But we can't have honest discussions. So let's talk about what the government of Canada is doing and how this also could affect Alberta separation. Because I've seen Aboriginal rights being used to stop Alberta separation. I just wasn't anticipating this court to say, well, we can't hold a referendum. We can't hold a referendum. That's really absolutely fantastic, isn't it? Even, law or no law, what we can't hold a referendum and decide whether most of us would want to leave. It's interesting. But let's understand that the government of Canada are the powers that guide us, because the government of Canada is really just a proxy for our colonial masters. So, but there was a time when it served their interests for us to be nation building. So they were happy to grant us, land rights. They were happy for us to be building farms. They were happy for us to be building roads. They were happy, basically, if, you got fee simple in rural property, you didn't need permits. You could build your barn. You could build your house. You could drill a well. None of that are we allowed to do anymore without government permission, because you have to understand that those people that control us, of which the parliament is just a proxy, they're no longer interested in us nation building. We are now in the nation destruction phase. And it's interesting, Bruce, I've had 3 different MPs from 3 different regions independently basically tell me, almost using the same language, that Canada is in a controlled demolition.
Wow.
Because we are in a controlled demolition. Our masters we're no longer nation building, we're nation destruction. So they need to destabilize the pillars of the society. It's literally the communist handbook, so that we can be remade into a communist nation. So you have to get God out of the picture first, and that's the first thing they did. They got God out of the schools,
foundation.
They got God out of our institutions. Yeah. They basically demonized Christianity. So you got to do that. You got to destabilize the family. So they're doing this with the gender ideology and kind of reduced morals. Marriage isn't forever anymore. My understanding is that the young people getting married today actually believe that they're going to be married again, which is strange, right? Could you imagine you're marrying somebody, you're going through this public exercise, you're making the commitment, in front of people that on its face is binding, but you fully believe you're going to go through that experience again. I'm just giving examples. We're going to get to the land,
or they're not even getting married.
Well, yeah, or even not that. But I'm just saying they have to destabilize us. They have to destabilize us economically, and the biggest obstacle is always the middle class. And in Canada, the middle class is most of their wealth, which is their power, is in the equity of their homes, is in the equity of their land. So they have to destroy that. Now, they might have a problem in Canada, as other governments, when they get to the point we're going to go full-blown communism, well, they actually just pass a law outlawing private property, and all of a sudden you don't own your land anymore. Right? So that might not go over well in Canada. So I've been talking about how, no, actually, they're going to overlay Aboriginal title onto our title and basically make our equity meaningless, and so confuse ownership so that we really have no meaningful ownership. We have no meaningful equity. Well, now we're communist. Just we're not called that anymore. Right. So let's talk about ownership.
Yeah. Can I just interject about that for 1 second? So I had seen this post on X today. I responded saying that this feels like what's happening in with the NDP and BC, and you and I are that's where you're leading this to is talking about what's happening obviously in BC, and I think you and I talked.
Oh no, I was going to talk about what's going to happen very soon in Alberta. So BC is just the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. So what it looks like to me, and tell me if I'm on the same track as what you're thinking, is that they're using the Indigenous, the Native population, as a tool or a wedge to they're what some would call the useless idiots, and they're going to use them to pry away the land rights or property rights of the property owners today, and then they'll just say that it's one world government. It's for the best of the land. It's for the environment, where we have to then have, nobody can have property rights. Is that kind of what you're seeing too?
Yes, it is. So if you're Aboriginal, you're not going to like being in a communist state. You're not going to like what's coming at all, and you are absolutely being used as the pretext. And this has been planned for a long time. So I mean, basically, what the government has done is it has funded. If I'm relying on Leighton Gray for this information, but we are spending more now on this 3% of the population than we spend on national defense. And we fund bands, we fund pressure groups to basically create this narrative that there's this huge injustice and that we have to totally solve this. Well, let's say you accept that narrative because there's counter narratives. And history is all extremely complicated. And, the reality is the Europeans came and they weren't going to leave. I mean, that's the reality. And also the reality is now there's 41 million of us. 3% are Aboriginal. And, if there were some unfairness issues, how do we solve this? But we don't solve it by basically undermining the pillar of our society, which is private property ownership, and moving into a communist state. That doesn't serve anyone's interest, and it ignores everyone else's rights. So we've created this social belief and and demand structure. We basically created a myth, right? And what I mean myth is you create political myths so that you can move society in specific directions. So when you're nation building, let's say the United States used to be nation building. I remember, when I was, I think preteen, I go to Disneyland, and I leave that place as a patriotic American, loving their Constitution, because they would promote those societal myths. And but we've changed ours, and now we've got this blood guilt if you're Caucasian, and this historic wrong to right. And we absolutely, like, everywhere you go, we've got all these land acknowledgements, all of this. Like, is it perpetual? And what's the purpose? It's to condition us to believe that we have to do something. So let's talk about the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So this is a treaty that basically obligates the return of all indigenous land that they used, occupied, whatever, actually returning ownership. So Section 26 of UNDRIP, this treaty that Canada signed on to, so has 3 clauses in Article 26. And the first is, you've basically got to give ownership back, but then it spells this out: use, occupation, development. So there's no ambiguity. It actually obligates Canada as a signatory to not only transfer land back, but so in such a way that the indigenous peoples have the right, to use, to occupy, to develop this land that they traditionally occupied. Well, that's all of occupied. What part of Canada where people live was an indigenous land? And this treaty does not limit itself to unceded land. Like, half of Canada is going, oh yeah, well, BC's unceded land. The treaty makes no distinction between ceded land, unceded land, patented land, land that 100 years ago the Crown paid above market value for and nobody got shafted land. It doesn't matter. It all goes back. So basically all of meaning, of occupied Canada goes back. Well, if signing the treaty wasn't enough, we passed the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act in 2021. So Parliament passes this act. Right. So we signed the treaty before that. And then we pass this act, and it appends to the treaty as a schedule. So there's no ambiguity of what the act is talking about. And this act compels the government of Canada to fully implement the treaty. So now Parliament has a legal obligation to transfer, and anyone can get the act, and it's an easy way to find the treaty. It's appended as a schedule. It obligates the government of Canada to basically transfer all the land back. It obligates other things also. But, have you read a copy of the treaty with the Musqueam people?
No.
It's been announced that the federal government has signed a treaty with the Musqueam Nation, which covers 2 million homes in the lower mainland of British Columbia. Or not 2 million homes, 2 million people live in this area. So that's a pretty big part of lower mainland. So they signed a treaty with the Musqueam Nation that covers where 2 million people live in the lower mainland. Well, why haven't you read a copy of the agreement, Bruce?
That's because, well, first of all, they didn't want you to read it.
Oh, because they haven't released it. That's why. My gosh, you're not a remote viewer, clearly. So, isn't that fascinating? So our federal government tells us that they've signed a lands rights agreement covering the land of where 2 million people in the lower mainland of British Columbia live, and they won't give us a copy of it. That's interesting. And this, this is part of our
That's
legal
interesting, but
with UNDRIP.
The crazy thing is, and we talked about this when I had Jim McMurtry on and Brody, Dallas Brody, and this is the crazy thing, is that they've been actually in court for 10 years, but they didn't want anybody to even know that they were in court.
Okay,
I mean,
this is separate. You're talking about you're talking about the Cowichan decision. So I'm talking about an agreement with the Musqueam Nation. That's not a court decision, but the Cowichan decision that you're talking about, the longest trial in Canadian history, governing, most of Richmond, British Columbia. So what you're referring to is this. So, here we've got the Cowichan band basically seeking a court declaration that they have Indigenous title over that land, that they own the land, that it's their land.
Right.
And both the governments of my understanding is the governments of BC and the government of Canada really didn't oppose that, because we're in this nation destruction now. And so the political direction is not to. Well, the court made a ruling that they were not going to inform the property owners, so the people that had what we call fee simple. So you bought a house, you're paying off your mortgage, you've paid off your mortgage, you bought a commercial building, all those people governed by that. Yep. Well, let's not tell them that there's a court case basically to take away their ownership, because that wouldn't be fair, would it, for them to come to court? And maybe
it wouldn't be fair.
No. I mean, if somebody's going to court to take away your ownership of land or anything else, I mean, certainly it wouldn't be fair for you to know that maybe you should be attending in court and having your say. So I'm being completely facetious here when I say that.
About it,
But here's what's interesting about the Cowichan decision is. And we'll just talk about ownership first. So I like to simplify things and really explain ownership as ownership defines who controls something. That's really what we mean when we're talking about ownership. Ownership is it legally defines who controls something. So, if you rent a house, you know that you can't move walls and you can't put in bigger windows, because your rental agreement is not going to give you that control. But the owner of the house can move walls or put in bigger windows. And when it comes to land, we've inherited a feudal system from the United Kingdom. So, in really simple terms, a ship from the United Kingdom with a Union Jack flag arrived on the East Coast, and they planted that flag. And that meant that the King or Queen of England owned all the land that they knew about. Now, it's a little more complicated than that, but really, in simple terms, that's the premise of the king owning our land. There's this feudal concept of occupancy. There's, really, it's just force. There was some purchase, and there was some land, ceded by treaty, but, you could make a very cogent argument that those treaties aren't valid, that they were one-sided. You could make a whole bunch of really good arguments. But I'm just actually even grappling, like, how does the crown, the monarch in the United Kingdom, end up owning all of Canada? But, go to any law school, first year property, you're going to be taught that the king has what's called allodial ownership of the land. So, and that's just title without a superior landlord. So the king is the superior landlord, and the king grants us, through Parliament and the legislatures now, if they cede crown land, we get what's called a fee simple. So really, a fee is just a grant. So a grant from the crown to be able to use land, and simple is without restriction. So, pull your land title, it'll say fee simple. And there will be, most of us, we're in a Torrance land title system now. So there'll be certain charges, rights of way and the like. But we don't really own the land. The crown is still sovereign over the land and can take the land away from us. Now, there's some common law principles that there should be compensation when that happens. It used to be that could only happen in times of war. But now, we all know the crown can expropriate our land, and almost every level of government imposes restrictions on us. Like I say, when I was younger, if you bought a rural property, you could build a house without a permit. You could drill a well without asking. You could build a barn. You could dig a dugout. Now, chances are you can't do it. You can't do any of that stuff without government permission now. And chances are really good. If you're near a waterway, you're not going to be able to do a dugout, and you're not going to be able to go shallow well, and this and that. Like, it's become so complicated that you can't turn around without government permission. Well, that's government assuming ownership, because ownership is who has the right to say what's used with something. So really, death by a thousand cuts, we've lost our right of ownership. Well, so understanding that ownership is just really, it defines who gets to say how something is used, who has control over it. Well, now we've got this Cowichan decision where a court has said, well, in the Richmond area, there is overlapping Indigenous title. Like they have title, they have land rights, they have ownership, and it overlays. So now you've got two types of ownership. You've got the fee simple granted by the crown, that the crown still can basically say you can't do anything. So really, you don't own it at all. They're not kicking us off the land yet, but now we've got a court overlaying some other title there. So who's the superior landlord? The king's still our superior landlord, or is it? Is now, if you're in the Richmond area, is the Cowichan band your superior landlord? So if you want to put in bigger windows, you have to get their permission. The other interesting thing about Indigenous title is they can't alienate it. Under the law, they can't alienate it. Like, you can sell your land, the government can expropriate your land, but we've got this legal doctrine that Native groups can only cede their land to the crown.
Right.
Oh, well, that's interesting. So now that's a court decision. Now we've got the Musqueam Nation, and again, relying on Leighton Gray. Apparently there's less than 2,000 members. So, so basically you've signed an agreement that apparently gives some type of ownership over 2 million homes in the Lower Mainland to a group of people of less than 2,000. Like, how does that happen? Like, so again, let's say that, the narrative of historical wrongs is even worse than the official narrative. Do you give ownership over, where 2 million people live to less than 2,000 people? Is that how you solve it? Because now you're victimizing those 2,000 people, and we've built this whole society on private property ownership. I get that that's an anathema to a communist state. We got to get rid of that for a communist state. But if our government was at all interested in having a cogent nation, in having us strong and free, then you wouldn't dare go there. You wouldn't start supporting the narrative decades before, so that you were priming the pump, so that you had this political myth to justify this, and you've put people to sleep over what's really going on. They actually support it. They don't understand that it has nothing to do with making life better for our Indigenous peoples, because it's not going to be better under a communist state. So getting back to Alberta, because I'm mindful of the
let's tie it
time.
back to Alberta.
Let's get back to Alberta. So the government of Parliament has bound itself to also for Alberta to basically transfer ownership of the land back to the Indigenous people, because what parts of Alberta is not the traditional land used, occupied, whatever, by Indigenous peoples? I mean, certainly the occupied parts of the province of Alberta was Indigenous land. So we've got this treaty saying you've got to give ownership back, which includes use, occupation, and development. And you've got this act that Parliament passed compelling Parliament to basically enact this treaty. So for political purposes, are we giving all of the land back and extinguishing our fee simple title? Are we basically overlaying? So now the Indigenous peoples have the right to use, occupy, and develop these lands. However you slice it, it is going to totally destabilize our society, which has been built on private property rights, whether you like it or whether you don't like it. Although most of the most prosperous civilizations have guarded private property rights. And then there's different ways of addressing inequalities that result from that. But you name a nation that did not completely impoverish its citizens, let alone extinguish their rights and cause mass deaths. You name one nation that went communist, that didn't become completely impoverished, that didn't, totally trample upon individual rights, and which didn't lead to mass deaths. Name one, Bruce.
Yeah.
Well, with such a perfect track record, communism didn't work everywhere else, so there's no good reason it can't work here either.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
so
let's just if you can impart your wisdom in regard to the Cowichan decision, and what that looks like today, after, because it's been about a year since it happened. I believe, I can't remember exactly when it happened, but what's playing out on the ground is something that we have to be we have to be on top of, not happening in our province here in Alberta or the rest of Canada. So what's happening to the property owners in the Cowichan, just for our audience to remind them what's going on?
Well, we don't know. The court put the province under an obligation to try and settle things, but nobody knows what this means, except that we've got this feudal fee simple property right, and now overlaid on top of that is Indigenous title, which is meaningful ownership. And so nobody knows what that means. Like, I mean, can you mortgage your house? Well, is a bank going to lend to you? I don't know. Or is the province stepping in? I mean, I haven't heard of horror stories yet. So
yeah, I have heard that people can't renew their mortgages because the banks are obviously, arms up in the air going, what?
Well, they don't know if there's any. Yeah, like, I mean, can you foreclose on a house that has native title?
That's right. I don't know. Can you?
No, nobody knows. Nobody. This is This is, pun intended, a brave new world.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's a brave new world. So let's get back, because I know you like to limit these to 45 minutes. Let's get back to.
Second. I got to show you that. I just found out something. I just was searching while you were talking about what's happened, and I just came across this. This is breaking for both you and I, is that Danielle Smith calls the court decision blocking independence incorrect and undemocratic, and says Alberta government will appeal it. That's obviously good news.
Right, but let's just talk about the legal environment that we've created.
Yeah, that's good.
So, we've had, and this isn't new, we've had several Supreme Court of Canada decisions basically saying that there is this Aboriginal title There's this Aboriginal title over the land, although it's not clear what that means, and that it can't be alienated from them except to the British Crown. And again, like, if Leighton Grey is right, and we're talking about 3% of the population, it means that 97% of the population are going to experience this overlaying of Aboriginal title. But how can a court, like, this court decision wouldn't have happened in a vacuum. So here, let's say, and I don't know, let's say that, Alberta, it's 3% of the population is Aboriginal. It may be less. Like, we may be talking just small numbers. But if if this small group has overlaying title over the entire province and cannot alienate that, according to the King's courts, except to the King, then how is it legally possible for Alberta to separate from the rest of Canada without the consent of these Indigenous groups that form a small minority of the current population? Like, under these legal doctrines, how is it possible without their consent? They can't alienate that, and we would be separate except to the Crown, the British Crown, and we would be separating from the British Crown. Do you see the legal mess here?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many layers, that were, I mean, there's so many layers that are now being introduced.
But it's deliberate. This is deliberate. Process.
Yes, of course it is.
This is deliberate. When Quebec was holding its referendums, the Indigenous issue was an issue that everyone assumed would just have to be negotiated if Quebec voted to separate, because we've got the Quebec reference in the Supreme Court of Canada, and the Supreme Court of Canada said if you have a clear majority on a clear question, then that would obligate Canada to negotiate with Quebec on separation, whatever that looks like. But the implication is that they would then negotiate in good faith a separation, and I guess we'd figure out how to settle things if they can't negotiate. But the idea that a small minority could, like, what if there was a small minority of a religious group that was ideologically opposed to separation? Could they block us? I mean, if Alberta from separating? It's a similar question. So we've kind of created this. So does this mean that if 97% of Albertans wanted to separate, or 60%, that we can't? Without extinguishing
that's what they're proposing,
Aboriginal title,
right?
I know that's what the court's saying, and I mean, I haven't read the decision, but ironically, the court could be right based on.
Well, I mean,
the court's obligated to follow the Supreme Court of Canada decisions that basically say there is this Aboriginal title to the land that can't be alienated from them except to the British Crown by agreement. So if that's the case, how do we leave the British Crown's, stewardship over these Indigenous lands?
What do you say to the argument that we continue to hear in regard to ceded land for the treaties 6, 7, and 8? Obviously, those are the ones that are
but first of all, understand UNDRIP makes no distinction between ceded, unceded, patented, purchased. All land traditionally. Look at Article 26. All land traditionally used, occupied, or whatever, they own. And it defines ownership as including use, occupation, and development. And think about where the trajectory is in the courts. So just, aside from this UN treaty and aside from the UNDRIP Act, which obligates Canada to basically restore ownership of all of occupied Canada to this very small minority of Indigenous peoples, like just ignoring that, we basically already had the court saying, no, there's this Aboriginal title over unceded lands. But let's talk about these treaties. So, you know, you've got some chiefs traveling to go and negotiate. Do they really have the authority of the people to cede the land to the British Crown? And then, you know, we'd play that trick where we wouldn't feed them for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden we'd feed them. And, you know, culturally they're creating this goodwill and reciprocity. And then, you know, over a very short period of time, cede large tracts of land to the British Crown. Did they understand what they were doing? I mean, are these binding agreements that will, like, because the next step is, well, no, actually, this isn't ceded land. These aren't valid agreements. We totally took them for a ride here.
Right.
They didn't have authority. They didn't understand the system. They didn't understand the language. They didn't understand what they were doing. They were being bullied. They felt like they had no choice. They were under duress, the whole thing. And there's validity to all of that.
Yes, there is.
But is the answer now in 2026 with 41 million people? We've added 8 million immigrants over the last, 12 years, or maybe 10 million. Like, I mean, are they all of a sudden you can't own property? Like, I mean, what are we doing here? If there are historical wrongs to right, do we do it by destabilizing our entire property structure? Yes, that's what we do when we're in the process of destroying a nation so that we can remake it as a communist state without strong property rights. Absolutely, that's what we do. And, you know, we set the stage for decades beforehand. This isn't by accident. How can it not be front page news that Canada signed UNDRIP when they did? And how can I talk to MPs who don't know about it? Like, how can it be that Canadians are not aware that Canada has passed an act obligating the government of Canada to basically dilute your ownership because ownership has control?
It's insane, but all I can say is that it's like they've made us into this guilt-ridden. We're all guilty of the crimes, and you started off by saying these are our children. Somebody born today would be guilty of
Let me turn it around so you can see how racist this is. So let's say we are going to basically transfer ownership. We're going to totally implement UNDRIP. The Indigenous groups are going to basically own the land. And, you know, let's say this whole experiment ends up in the predictable disaster. Millions of people are, you know, the whole country's impoverished. Poverty brings worse health outcomes. There's more deaths. Let's say that isn't even the government that kills a bunch of people. It happens every time you move over into communism. But let's say we escape that somehow, but we're just totally impoverished. Whole bunch of people end up dying, worse standards of living, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, 200 years from now, we come to our senses, and it's like these Indigenous people who are our superior landlords. You know, we're all angry at them. How dare you do this? And then, you know, so 200 years from now, some Indigenous children are born, and they're responsible for what happened today. They're guilty for what happened in 2026. And they owe the Caucasians retributions. they owe the Caucasians land. We'd find that outrageous and racist.
Right.
I'm sorry, every Canadian would find that racist and outrageous. But when you say that Caucasian children that had nothing to do with any of this happened hundreds of years ago, that's not racist. That's justice. Racism is racism. In fact, what racism does is racism justifies the treatment of one race differently than another race. That's what racism is. And it always makes sense to the population that is enforcing racism, because you can only have a racist society when your explanations, you've taught the populace to accept the explanations of unequal treatment. That's how it works.
Wow. That was powerful. Oh, I mean, I can see it myself, and I know that many of our viewers can see this. And I know that we didn't talk about what we originally set out to talk about, but this is fascinating. So obviously, the BC, and you probably agree with me, but BC is a complete loss as far as I'm concerned. It's almost like it's off a cliff at this point. What do we do about Alberta? Because we need to save Alberta and we need to save our families here. Because to me, I've said it a number of times, is I've pulled back the front lines and said, okay, I can defend Alberta. The rest of Canada, I think, is a lost cause.
Well, I think, Bruce,
like, what do we do? Yeah,
Bruce, absolutely every person in Canada, let alone Alberta, but every 41 million of us all need to watch the movie Gandhi. Yeah. Okay, we have to watch the movie Gandhi. It's a must. Not a may, it's a must. Watch the movie Gandhi, and you're going to learn two things. You're going to learn just how significant the cost of peaceful civil disobedience really is when you truly engage in peaceful civil disobedience. There is a tremendous cost. There is death, there is crippling, there's disablement, there is economic destruction when the citizens in enough numbers peacefully resist. And the second thing you're going to learn is there's nothing more powerful than a population committed to peaceful civil disobedience. It's the only way. It's the only way to change things, but the cost is high. So every Canadian should watch Gandhi for one, because it's the only path out of civil disobedience. And if we do not want this nation, this controlled demolition to continue, then we are in large numbers going to have to engage in peaceful civil disobedience, despite the cost, because the cost of not doing it is going to be so much greater. But
right. I mean,
we have to reject the authority. Like, remember I spoke at the beginning in the most simplified terms, but it's true, is a ship arrived from the UK with a Union Jack and planted it in the ground, and somehow the king's got authority and the king owns the land. And the Aboriginals can only alienate it from the king. This is not a legal foundation that's reasonable. So why are we even accepting this false legal foundation? The king doesn't own the land. This was just a legal fiction for us to nation build. That's all it is. It was a legal fiction for us to nation build.
Yeah.
And historical rights or wrongs, the king doesn't have authority and the king's courts don't have authority. And this whole legal structure is just a fiction created to control us. And it is controlling us because we're allowing it to control us. So what we do in 2026 is there's 41 million of us. how do we now structure
Yeah.
so that, you know, God's sovereign over our land and we love each other like we love ourselves? What does that look like? Those are the two questions in Alberta, where there's 5 million of us. How do we structure ourselves now so that, you know, God's sovereign and supreme and we love our neighbor like ourselves? What does that look like? But to say that we're governed by this legal structure that's based on somebody planting a Union Jack on the East Coast, and somehow magically the king, by some common law doctrine or some treaty of nations or some papal declaration that civilized Christian people can occupy, you know, heathen lands, whatever the justifications were, why don't we just accept that that's crap? Like, Europeans came, and now, you know,
100%,
people from all around the world have come, and here we are. And how do we structure now going forward? So the emperor has no clothes. There is not even an emperor. And why are we allowing ourselves to be controlled? Because we've been taught things to control us. And we just have to stop. We just have to say, now we're taking control over this nation. How do we structure? What's happening now isn't working, and thank you very much. We're no longer interested in these power structures that are deliberately destabilizing us and deliberately dividing us and are deliberately racist. Thanks, but no thanks. And go on.
Yeah. We do not agree and we do not comply.
Watch Gandhi.
Watch Gandhi. This is the action moment for everybody, and I've never seen it myself, I have to admit.
Oh, you'll be shocked at how powerful it is. You'll be shocked at how powerful it is.
This is the time. This is amazing, Shawn. This turned out to be even better than I think the original plan for our conversation. So
that was going to be a good conversation too. But anyway, we'll have it at a later.
Of course, it will be. Of course, it will be. We're gonna have to have another conversation where we talk about clone meats. But this is so important at this time. I mean, obviously there was a decision.
You see, the cloned meat is tied into the cloned meat is tied into getting rid of the family farm and consolidating into corporations. And there's a specific reason tied to the cloned meat that will shock you, and people need to hear it. So we do need to have that show. It's not just about cloned meat; it's about getting rid of the small farm for a specific reason that the cloned meat is tied into.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned it. You were talking about communism. We've gone through some of the things that have been proposed, as in government grocery stores, and I mean, that is 100%.
The Carney government has been talking openly about universal basic income. They talk openly about that universal basic income.
Right, and I don't remember which bill is that they're hoping to impose that would, structure the foundations of UBI. But I mean, that is definitely the plan, is to free Canadians from having to work to build or
it's
accomplish
to create
anything.
It's to create votes. It's to create dependence upon the government, because if we're dependent on the government, then the government controls us. I mean, it's pure and simple. If you depend on somebody, if you're not self-sufficient, then that person owns you, because you can't defy them. And unless there is just some huge scandals that somehow come out federally, are we not really already in a one-party state? I mean, is it possible for the Liberal Party to lose a federal election?
How much of a worse scandal can you have, other than what's already gone on? But the media, it's only one part, but the media has continued to sweep it under the rug and to hide it and to obfuscate, the real crimes. And RCMP, I mean, they're not doing anything to stop this, but oh goodness gracious, Shawn,
What are you referring to?
amazing. Sorry. Now I've lost the train because I was looking.
Well, you're
at
talking
at
about the
comment here,
RCMP is
but
not doing anything to stop it. And I
oh,
was not sure what you're referring to.
I'm talking about the crimes. I'm talking about crimes.
Oh, okay,
Justin
just crime.
Trudeau,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, they're supposed to be the body that stops crime. They're supposed to be the ones that investigate crimes, no matter who it is. Nobody's above the law. That's what we keep hearing, except our governments. It doesn't matter really who's in power. Our governments have been corrupt and have.
Okay, hang on a second. The police answer to the Attorney General, who is a member of
Right.
either the provincial or federal cabinet. Like, what are we talking about? We've structured our system so that the government's not accountable. Like,
That's right.
That's the natural. I mean, what, the Attorney General is going to have the police investigate the government the Attorney General is part of? It's part of just how so flawed our system is against the citizen. So,
Yes.
I mean, I'm confused that you even see it as an issue because, well, of course, the government's not going to be investigated criminally because the government controls the police.
Yeah. Well, they're supposed to be at arm's length, but
that would be a conflict of
that's
interest for the government.
Yes, it certainly would. Oh, Shawn, nhppa.org. I know that you guys have been doing a lot of work. You just finished before you came on here with a live. I think you're doing it once a month for NHPPA. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing for NHPPA?
Yeah. So let me plug the NHPPA. So NHPPA stands for Natural Health Product Protection Association. So we're a federally incorporated not-for-profit that is there to protect our health rights and to basically protect our access to health choices with particular emphasis on natural remedies. So, and we're doing a lot of work right now on things like UNDRIP, on land rights and that, because the reality is our health starts with healthy food, which isn't going to happen in the corporate farms. We need family farms. We need small farms. We need the small producers. And so we're doing a lot on that. We're doing a lot on UNDRIP. We're doing a lot on how basically the small farms, it's an active phase of getting rid of the small farmers, and we're explaining how that is. We have a couple of events coming up. We've got one in just outside of Edmonton on June 2nd. We've got a bigger one in Onaway, I think on June 27th. You see nhppa.org. If you go there, we have a newsletter. We only send out one email a week, but we let you know what's going on. So we'd let you know about these live events. We'd let you know about our podcasts. We have a campaign right now. We helped get a private members bill into committee, and we're inviting people to write letters to the Standing Committee of Health and also to submit briefs. We filed in Parliament the third largest paper petition in Canadian history, basically calling on the government to enact a Charter of Health Rights to just entrench the rights the courts say we already have. And the government has a moral obligation to respond to the third largest paper petition in Canadian history. And so we have a campaign where you can just, very easily, 5 minutes on our website, you can send e-letters to every Liberal MP encouraging the government to have a good response. So we always make it very easy for you to take action. And actually, if you subscribe to our newsletter and start engaging in our campaigns, you're going to learn how to put pressure on the government so you can do it without our help. So so please, thanks for letting me plug the NHPPA. We're a fundamental organization in basically doing what you and I just did on the show.
I have to tell you, I'm going to take a little bit of a bow here, but I did send some letters to my MP, Shawn, because of our last meeting. I printed off the letters and customized them for myself, and then sent them off to my MP. So yes, it's very easy to do, and I would encourage everybody to head to nhppa.org. I've got it pulled up here. I've also got the links in the comments, Shawn. So I appreciate you being here. And that was a very lively conversation. I really, really appreciate, getting into that. And I would love to talk more about it. So if another day, maybe you and I can have a longer conversation about it. I would love that anyway. It doesn't matter how long it takes. But we also need to be talking about what's going on with the farms. And like I say at the beginning of my show, I love to support local. We have to support our farmers and ranchers and make sure that they realize, actually for your family, and I'm just going to say this, but for your own family, it's important. And I know we've got a comment here from ICXCVPN. My family and I'm just going to read this out here, have been homesteaders for the last 3 years, from a few chickens to now a flock of sheep, turkeys, layers, meat, birds, and a garden twice the size of our house. By the grace of our loving God, he laid his path for us. And that's what it's all about. I think you have to take care of your family, and, making these connections with farmers, ranchers, and people in your community are really, really important. Don't you think, Shawn?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And our food supply, like what's happening to our animals, how we're treating them, and what they're forcing into the meat. You really need to find a farmer that is willing to literally break the law so that you can have meat that's reasonably safe to eat for your family. Like it isn't it odd? Like it's getting to the point. It's not getting to the point. So I'm not going to say, where my family sources its meat from, but we've gotten to the point where you have to find people that are willing to break the law for you to have healthy food. Welcome to Canada.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, no kidding. You know what? We're going to have many more lively conversations about food and about Canada in general. And I appreciate your insight into what's happening with our land. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. I appreciate it.
If you don't mind, stick around. Well, thank you so much. Just stick around if you don't mind. I'm just going to say goodbye to the audience, and you and I can have 15 seconds to catch up. All right. Thank you so much for being here. If you are still watching, make sure to share this out. Send it to your friends, your family, social media, because we are continually fighting against big media and government forces that try to keep this message from getting out to people. This is Bruce Scholl. Keep your head on a swivel. Let's stay sane together, you guys. And I'm out of here. Thank you so much for watching Unscrew the News. I appreciate your participation in freedom in Canada. Share this information and help others to wake up. God bless.